It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show. Today's date is June 2nd. We are into June. It's the first working day for a lot of people in June. And this is segment B, which means we start at right around 7:20. We do this show live, 7 to 8 o'clock every morning, Central Daylight Time. I was going to say standard, but we're in Daylight Time. Central Daylight Time. And then we chop it up and put it on our podcasts and on our YouTube channel, which John does a great job. And it's bjshow.us now on the YouTube channel. Last night, John, I decided I was not going to eat another meal in my car at a drive-thru, so I went to a nice restaurant. Are you ready for this, John?
Wow, really?
And there was a wait line, and I had to put my name on the list. And as I put my name on the list, the woman said, "I recognize your voice." And I said, "You do?" She says, "You're on the radio, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "You're that Brad Hildebrand guy, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah." And then her next question was,
"What would you do with a brain if you had one?"
I'm sorry, John.
I thought you were going to say, "Is your name Bob Frischman?" Because people heard him on Friday, Brad.
Okay. A couple things to talk about, and I'm not going to start off with what you think I'm going to talk about. Asymmetrical warfare. Did you see the details behind the Ukrainians' attack on the Russian airfields? Have you read this story?
I haven't read it. No, I just heard and saw the news headlines. Tell us about it, Brad.
It's incredible. See, I say, and I'm going to tee off all the Boeing people in town, we're missing the boat. Asymmetrical warfare is here. And instead of cranking out one F-18 every 6 months, we should be cranking out about 50 drones every day. The Ukrainians have been working on this for a year and a half. And what they did was they built these tractor-trailer bodies with launching pads, but they had doors on them, so you couldn't tell what they were. And they had several of these. I think they had 5 or 6 of these. And they built these tractor-trailers with these, they look like a cargo trailer. Actually, it started to look like a shipping container on the back of a tractor-trailer kind of thing. And they had doors on them. And they're still not exactly, the word hasn't come out exactly how they did this by remote control, stuff like that. And they strategically moved these tractor trailers with these drones inside to within striking distance of all the airfields. Now, the reason for that is because Russia has a pretty good, like, Iron Dome kind of system that if you try to fire missiles at any of the bases or at Moscow, they knock them out of the sky. Sort of like the Patriot thing that the Israelis have. Okay, so synchronized, the sides of these trailers opened up, and these drones attacked the Russian Air Force planes at the Air Force Base. And they blew up a bunch of them. And I'm going like, holy cow. And also, in sync around the country of Russia, a bunch of railroad bridges were blown up. Now, in Russia, the railroads are still heavily used. Not like the United States with Amtrak as far as, passenger, but there's still a lot of passengers. In Europe, all over Europe, there's a lot of passenger trains that go around, and especially like in Russia. And they blew up railroad trestles. Asymmetrical warfare. I mean, instead of, and I'm not knocking Boeing, I'm not like doing my Cory Bush thing where, we need to shut down Boeing, they're terrible people. And I'm not doing that, but if you look at what's going on with this, and I've said this all along. Remember, I'm the guy that said, instead of building F-18s, we should be go back and build the old P-51 Mustangs. John, I can't go through a week without bringing up P-51 Mustangs. Can I, John?
And mention too, Brad, you pointed out that folks could just go to Home Depot and buy a whole bunch of drones and do the same thing, right?
Well, not Home Depot. You can't get them at Home Depot. But
well, whatever.
Yeah, the crazy thing about it is because what they're doing is, my point is, if you send in one F-18 to go attack something, if they get them on the surface air missiles and knock the F-18 out, bang, you just lost millions and millions of dollars. Or if it rolls off the top of a aircraft carrier and goes into the ocean, you lost it. That's a whole other story. But if you have 100 drones that are let's say they're expensive drones, they're $10,000 a piece drones, and you launch 100 drones at a particular target, the chances are that maybe the defense system can shoot down 50, 60, 70, but you're going to have 30 of them that are going to get through and blow things up. See, I'm telling you, the situation is, and you ask military planners, they've got their eyes on this Ukrainian-Russian war. They do, because it's changed the way things are done. And not only that is remember, everybody said when the Ukrainian war, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, they said, Kiev will fall. Putin will be standing in the square of Kiev within 4 days, right? It's coming up on 2 years. And I think probably in the history of warfare, this has got to be one of the most misjudged attacks of all time. To the point where go back to Pearl Harbor. I mean, the Japanese, there's a whole theory behind that. If you read your World War II theory, that the absolute positive worst thing the Japs did was attack Pearl Harbor, because we got pissed. And we go like, okay, we're going to drive them into oblivion. And then we bombed them with 2 nukes. We put like the exclamation on the end of that war. You know what I'm saying? And to the point where...
Yeah. And so what surprises me about this, Brad, you've been talking about this for a long time. Why don't you think that Russia should have been prepared? Ukraine has signaled that they're into this kind of thing. And anybody, to your point, who's watched warfare over the last decade has seen this. How are they not better prepared for this?
Because they're old school. You mean the Russians prepared for this?
Yeah. Why are they not, why did they not anticipate that this could happen and do something to mitigate it?
It's the B word. You know what the B word is?
No, what is it?
Bravado.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm a big fan of being the underdog. Because when you get the bravado in you, oh man, we can beat them. I mean, and it's in so many different things. Look at all the startup companies that, the big boys said, oh my God, that company's never going to go anywhere. And yet it becomes a huge company. I mean, look at the crazy stuff that, when Starbucks started, okay? People go, oh, it's a cute little coffee shop. It's in Seattle. It'll never go anywhere.
Nobody's going to pay that much for coffee.
Right, exactly. Nobody's going to pay that much for coffee. When you go to a diner and it's got a bottomless cup of coffee for $1, why would you go to a Starbucks and pay $10 for a cafe chamaco or whatever the hell it is? And if you want another one, they're going to charge you another $10.
Let's get back to the war. So you're saying that Russia just had so much bravado. Do you think maybe it's a resource thing? Like Russia was so concerned with traditional warfare that they thought, okay, we don't have the resources to build something to defend against this. I just think once it's gotten down to the lowest common denominator of Brad Hildebrands knowing about asymmetrical warfare, you would think that actual war generals would know about it.
It's pretty interesting because of the fact that you're going to think I do weird stuff. I watched this documentary last night on Motor Trend, okay? And it's pretty interesting because of the fact that it chronicles Motor Trend, the magazine, then it chronicles them on the cable TV channels and the whole bit. And time after time after time, the reason that the Motor Trend, they had a channel at one point in time and it went into the tubes, they shut it down, or might be still around, I don't know. But time after time after time, they said the worker bees at Motor Trend said the executives don't understand what they're dealing with. The executives are not car guys. The executives, and what they were talking about was the executives at Motor Trend said, we've got to show all these shows about rebuilding 50s, 60s, and 70s muscle cars. And yet they didn't see what happened with the Fast and Furious franchises. That these guys, for the most part, were not driving 50s and 60s and 70s muscle cars, although that is in the original. So
they were into modern cars with just aftermarket parts.
They were into,
Motor Trend should have focused on that.
They were into rice rockets and tuners. Okay, that's what they were into. Okay, and they missed it because their management. Okay, the problem in Russia is Putin is all powerful, and if you disagree with Putin, you fall out of the window of a 10-story hotel. You know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying.
Strangely enough, for some reason, you're looking out the window and you lose your balance and you fall out the window of a 10-story building, a hotel in Russia, even though you shouldn't be in a hotel because you got a house, but you fall out of a hotel window. That's the reason. He's the guy. He doesn't answer to anybody. And he's back and he's got the old KGB mindset. He's got the old, we make tanks. We have nice tanks. If you go back and study World War II and how they resisted the Nazis and how they fought back and essentially drove the Nazis back into Germany, they're still living that because what's Putin trying to do? He's trying to resurrect the USSR. He's trying to put the Soviet empire back with the Eastern European satellites, the whole bit. He don't get it. And all of a sudden he attacks, those Ukrainians, they don't have anything. They don't have an air force. They don't have a navy. They have no ships. We'll just go in and we'll just take 2-3 days. And I'll be walking into Kyiv and I'll be sitting in the prime minister's office with my feet up on the desk. Didn't happen. And I think, unfortunately, the United States is in the same way. We're so stuck in the way. This is the way we do things. We build these big aircraft carriers, and put them all over the world, and we show our power. Okay, but yet, here you got the Ukrainians building drones. Some of these are off-the-shelf drones, and they're actually making their own drones now. I mean, John, is there any place in Missouri making drones? No.
Yeah. Have we found out what happened to the drones in 2024? Wasn't Trump going to give us some answers on that?
Well, they came out. They finally came out and said it was some government program. They admitted that.
Oh, I must have missed that. Okay.
Oh, yeah. They said it was some government
it's
program.
not like there was a giant Chinese spy balloon flying over our country while Joe Biden was lost in his closet.
Okay, one of the stories last week, I don't know if I read all sorts of weird stuff. One of the stories last week was this massive plane that the Chinese have put together, which is like a drone carrier in the sky. And from this massive plane, they can launch like 100 drones. So in other words, they could fly that plane across the Atlantic, Pacific in the United States. They could, come off the coast of California, they come off the coast of Maryland, or, one of the mid-Atlantic coast states, and open the Bombay door and drop out all these drones, and you got 100 drones attacking the White House. Okay? I mean, that's a real deal. It's not pie in the sky, but yet what are we doing? We're building bombers. We're building the B-2.
Well, I mean, isn't there probably a chance, Brad, that some folks are working on projects that maybe the information hasn't gotten down to you and I?
You would see that in the budgets. You don't see that.
Okay. So you think that the military would disclose spending on secret projects? You think that they would put that in a like congressional budget?
The interesting thing about this is, and you know what, I read too much of this kind of weird stuff. The interesting thing about this is Pete Hegseth has already attacked one issue, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but he got rid of 40 four-star generals, put him into retirement, okay? And the story came out, I read the story, don't hold me to the exact numbers, but in World War II, we conquered the Nazis and the Japanese with, I think, like 20 generals, 20 four-star generals. And I still remember the Brian Nieves thing, be my little general, B is 1-star, brigadier, M is major, 2-star, lieutenant is 3, and general is 4. 4-star is a general. Okay, we beat the Nazis and the Japs with 20 4-star generals. Now we have 120. What do? They're so far away from the grunt on the front line, because they're too busy attending White House events and doing this and doing that. They don't get down and dirty anymore. And
Don't you think some of them go to the store and buy off-the-shelf drones? They heard a local radio guy say that's the key. And people in the military were like, wow, we've never thought of that. And we put everything that we spend money on in the budget. Maybe we should go to the store and buy some drones.
John, there's a new controversy they're going to replace the M4, which is the current, it was the M16. The M4 is essentially the shorter carbine version of the M16. And that's the weapon that most of the forces use now, the M4. Okay? Essentially,
what are they going to replace it with, Brad?
It's this new weapon with a new round. And what's interesting about it is the soldiers who have tested this weapon and the ones who have to carry it in battle and the grunts who are actually, they're coupled small divisions or whatever you call it, regiments, or I don't know what I'm not in. My dad would be upset if I don't know the hierarchy of the army. There's some of them already using it. They hate it. The grunts hate it. They talk about it has this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. But you know what? We've got to replace that rifle. We've got to replace the rifle. Now, the crazy thing about this is the Russians are still using essentially the same rifle that came from 1947, the AK-47, which is technically not an AK-47, it's AK-74. It's the same damn rifle which has been battle-proven for decades. Nope, we can't do that. And we've been through the M1 Garand. They used the M14, which was a POS. Then they went to the M16 in Vietnam. They rushed into the the production and had some problems with ammunition. At first, it was very problematic. They've cured all the problems. It's become probably one of the finest weapons in the world. But no, we have to get rid of it because we have to build new rifles because the old ones are just old. But yet, the Russians and the Chinese are still using AKs. See what I'm saying, John?
I do, yeah. And hey, here's the thing. First of all, this segment, when I make notes of this, will be called GI Brad, because you have a lot more information and knowledge than the people that actually do military for a living. And secondly, maybe it's just the Russian and Chinese troops, or maybe they're trained better than our soldiers, Brad, and they could use rickety old technology, right?
But it's not rickety. I mean, you ask any gun enthusiast about the reliability of an AK. I mean, there's videos on YouTube. You can watch them of guys who take an AK, they go and they bury it in the ground and let it sit for like a week, and they pull it out of they dig it up, put a magazine in the thing, bah, 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 off it goes. I mean, they just work. And it's like I told you, the military expert that I watched an fascinating story on YouTube about World War II. The Germans had better tanks. The Germans had better aircraft. The Japanese had better aircraft, at least to start with, and then we one-upped them. But what were we able to do? We were able to outproduce them. For every tank the Nazis built, we built 10. For every fighter plane the Japanese built, we built 8.
So it was volume, and we had a better supply chain, is what you're saying.
And they weren't as sophisticated. That's the key.
Who's they? We or them?
The American tanks were not as sophisticated as
I see. Okay, they were very simple.
And
that would be like an old guy complaining that you can't buy a stripped down version of a truck anymore. You'd have to bring it in from overseas, right?
The German tanks were very sophisticated, but they were very problematic. Just like German cars nowadays. Watch all the videos on TV, all the guys making fun of the Beamers and the Mercedes-Benz. They've gotten so complicated that they're like almost impossible to fix. And by the way, John, it's funny you should mention say what you just said again. Say what you just said again.
That there's an old guy I know that complains about the fact that there's stripped down versions of trucks and here it's called a Tacoma or something. I usually tune out and reorganize my sock drawer when you launch into that every week. But something about how there's a version of a truck that's sold overseas that you can't buy the same version here because you can't buy the stripped down version in the United States.
Funny you should mention that, because just last week, a listener to the show sent me an article about what they call the key trucks, which are these very, very small like real small mini pickup trucks, almost to the point where they look like almost like comparable to like a side-by-side or an ATV or something like that. And they're all over the world, but not in the United States. And if they were imported in the United States, they'd be about $9,000 or $10,000. You know why they're not here, John?
Why is that, Brad? I bet it's a conspiracy by the car makers.
No, it's because of the fact that they don't adhere to the safety standards. They don't comply with the pollution standards, and yet they're all over the world. And yet we got to worry about we've got pollution and we've got to drive clean cars.
Yeah, we got some kind of monitor. The only thing I care about when I buy a vehicle is, are we forcing the car manufacturers to put AM radio in there? That's all I care about. Because in a disaster, nobody's going to rely on their cell phone. They're going to rely on local AM radio.
John, ask the people in
I won't. I don't care enough.
Ask the people in Joplin after the tornado went through what worked and what didn't. The Zimmer stations were still on the air broadcasting emergency information, but the cell phone system was, for the most part, destroyed. So
amazing. That's amazing.